Adrian Ross didn't usually take wine advice from strangers, but the woman in front of him wasn't just anyone. She was explaining the difference between blackberry and blackcurrant notes like it actually mattered. And somehow, he found himself hanging on every word. "I know it sounds ridiculous," she said, swirling the glass in her hand, "but if you close your eyes and taste that again, you'll catch the tiniest trace of cracked pepper right at the end." Adrian raised his brow and took another sip. She was right. It was subtle, but it was there. "Okay," he said slowly, "but how the hell did you even notice that?" The woman smiled, but it wasn't shy, it was confident, like she'd done this 100 times and never once doubted herself. "Because wine is memory. And that one tastes like the time my older sister dared me to chew a peppercorn when I was 8. He laughed, the sound coming out more genuine than it had in weeks. "That's oddly specific." "I'm Delilah Carter," she said, holding out her hand. "And you're either pretending to care about wine or you're actually trying to learn." He took her hand, surprised by the warmth of her grip. "Adrian, just Adrian. You don't look like a just Adrian," she said, eyeing his watch. "You look like a flew here on a private jet and owns half the city, Adrian." He tilted his head, amused. "What if I told you I just like watches?" "I'd say that's a very expensive hobby," she replied, already turning back toward the next bottle on the table. She poured a little into his glass and gave him a quick glance. "This one will ruin your life in the best way, bold, demanding, and unforgettable." His lips twitched. "Sounds like someone I just met." She didn't answer, but her faint smile told him she'd heard it. Adrian had been dragged to this private Napa Valley wine tasting by a business partner who'd bailed at the last minute. He'd almost skipped it himself until he walked into the candlelit rustic barn and saw Delilah standing behind the tasting table, explaining flavor profiles with more passion than he'd heard in any boardroom deal. "You work here?" he asked, swirling the dark red liquid in his glass. "I own part of the vineyard," she said, grabbing a bottle from the side table. "My parents started it and I've been running tastings for years. Keeps me grounded." She didn't ask what he did. That alone made her different. He'd been to high-end events all over the world, and everyone always wanted to know the same thing: what he did, who he knew, how much he was worth. Delilah didn't care, or at least she didn't pretend to. "So," he said, taking another sip, "what's this one supposed to taste like?" "Childhood trauma and a hint of regret," she laughed, loud and unfiltered. "More like wild cherries and a touch of heartbreak." "Why heartbreak?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Because this one's aged longer than you'd expect. It's mellow, but it surprises you when you least expect it." He studied her, the way her eyes flicked to him and back, like she didn't want to admit she was intrigued too. The rest of the tasting went quickly. A few other guests mingled, mostly couples, but Adrian didn't notice anyone else. And Delilah. She didn't rush him. She gave him stories with each glass, memories tied to flavors. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't need to. When he finally set his glass down, he said, "You ever do private tastings?" She raised a brow. "Depends on the client. I'm staying at a place just outside the valley. I'd pay double your rate." She looked amused. "You don't even know my rate." "Doesn't matter." He leaned a little closer. "I just want to hear more of your stories." Delilah hesitated, then grabbed a small notepad from beneath the counter and scribbled something. She handed him a card. "One-time offer," she said. "Tomorrow, 5 p.m., don't be late." He took the card. "And if I bring a bottle of something terrible," she grinned, "then you'll have to stay until we fix it." Diamond suit the next day, Adrian arrived right on time wearing jeans and a dark button-up, trying to blend in, which never worked. Delilah was already on the back patio of the vineyard's guest cottage, 2 glasses and a charcuterie board waiting on a wooden table overlooking the vines. "You're punctual," she said, pouring the first bottle. "I didn't want to miss the heartbreak vintage." She laughed, and this time she looked at him a little longer, like she was starting to see him differently. "So," she asked, sitting across from him, "what do you actually do?" "Just Adrian," he could have lied. But for some reason, he didn't want to. "I run a private equity firm," he said. "Real estate, tech, some media, boring stuff unless you're into spreadsheets." She leaned back in her chair. "Let me guess, you're worth a few billion and you're tired of people pretending to like you." He blinked. "That's not far off. I'm not impressed," she said with a shrug, "but I'm not judging you either. Good, he replied, because I couldn't stop thinking about you all night. Delilah's eyes locked on his. That's a line. It's not, he said, his tone suddenly serious. You talk about wine like it's art. You made me taste things I didn't even know existed. That's rare. She looked down for a second, then back up. You're not what I expected either. They spent hours on that patio. She told him about growing up on the vineyard, losing her dad 2 years ago, and how she almost sold the place but couldn't bring herself to do it. He listened, really listened. And when the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky turned burnt orange, he reached across the table and took her hand. I've bought castles for less than what this night means to me, he said. Delilah blinked, caught off guard. You don't have to say that. I'm not trying to impress you, he said gently. I'm trying to be real. She didn't pull her hand away, and when he leaned in, she met him halfway. Their kiss tasted like the wine she'd poured, sweet, warm, and just a little dangerous. Delilah pulled back slowly, her eyes still closed. You're trouble, she whispered. And you're the best thing I've never planned for, he replied. Neither of them said it, but something had already shifted. Tomorrow wasn't just another day. For both of them, it had already started to feel like the beginning of something real. Delilah hadn't meant to wake up thinking about him. She'd planned to start her morning with a vineyard walk, check the fermentation room, and finalize the tasting schedule for the weekend. But instead, she'd stood in front of her bathroom mirror, brushing her hair with a little too much care, replaying the way Adrian had tucked a strand behind her ear just before he kissed her. That hadn't been part of the plan. She didn't do impulsive. She didn't do strangers. And she absolutely didn't do men whose shoes probably cost more than her monthly payroll. Yet here she was, distracted, unsettled, and looking for excuses to wander past the guest cottage, where he'd said he'd be staying until Sunday. By mid-afternoon, she was in the cellar, cataloging stock, when her assistant Mateo appeared in the doorway, holding a clipboard and looking amused. There's a man by the east trellis asking for you, he said. Tall, expensive watch. Looks like he's never held pruning shears in his life. Delilah wiped her hands on her apron and followed Mateo outside. Adrian was standing under the tangled canopy of grapevines, 1 foot on the low stone wall and a camera slung around his neck. I didn't know you were into photography, she said, approaching cautiously. I'm not, he said, lowering the camera. But you told me wine was about memory. I figured I should start collecting a few. She folded her arms, still a little wary. You came back. I didn't think you'd want me to, he said, his tone unexpectedly careful. I didn't say that. He studied her for a moment, then turned the camera around and showed her the last photo sunlight filtering through the vines, catching the dew on the leaves like little fireflies. That's not bad, she admitted, surprised. I've spent my life building things I can't hold, he said. Stocks, companies, futures. But that, he tapped the screen, that's real. That's now. She glanced away, flustered by the sudden shift in tone. You didn't come here for pictures. No, he said. I came to ask if you'd have dinner with me. Delilah hesitated. In town? No, he said, lifting the basket beside him. Here. I brought dinner to you. She stared at the woven basket, half expecting it to be filled with overpriced truffle, risotto, and caviar, but he pulled out fresh sourdough, a wedge of local cheese, and a container of marinated olives. You bought this from the farm stand down the road, she said, stunned. I asked the woman there what you usually buy, he said, setting everything on the low wall. She said you like the rosemary bread, and that you tip too much. Delilah sat down beside him, trying not to let her heart race. You really don't know how to be normal, do you? I'm trying, he said. But I have to warn you I'm terrible at pretending. She bit into the bread, her defenses softening with the crust. Why are you really here? Adrian didn't answer right away. He poured them each a glass of wine, one she instantly recognized as their estate's reserve Syrah, and passed it to her without flourish. I've spent the last 10 years turning everything I touch into a transaction, he said. But last night, it didn't feel like a trade. It felt like a choice. Delilah stared at the hills in the distance, the sky stretched wide and gold above them. You're not going to stay, she said finally. You're not the kind of man who sets roots. I didn't think I was, he said, his voice low. But maybe I just hadn't found the right soil. She turned to him slowly, surprised by the earnestness in his expression. It wasn't charm, it wasn't strategy, it was just him. "You don't know me," she said, searching his face. "I know you don't let people in easily," he said. "I know you care about this place the way most people care about blood, and I know that when you talk about wine, you talk like it's alive." Delilah swallowed hard. "You don't get to come in here and say things like that. I'm not playing a game," he said, reaching for her hand. "I just want to know what it feels like to build something that doesn't collapse the moment I stop fighting it." She looked down at their hands, his thumb brushing hers lightly. "Are you always like this?" she asked. "All intensity and declarations." "No," he said. "Usually I'm worse." She laughed before she could stop herself, and it broke the tension like a warm breeze. They ate slowly, watching the sky deepen into a dusky violet. He told her about the first company he built in college, how it failed spectacularly, and taught him more than any investor ever had. She told him about the time a summer storm flooded the lower vineyard, and she stayed up all night with Matteo digging drainage trenches by flashlight. They didn't kiss again, but when he walked her back to the cottage and paused outside the door, he didn't try to press the moment. He just brushed his fingers down her arm and said, "I'll be here tomorrow." "If you want." Delilah watched him walk away, her chest tight with something she didn't want to name yet. The next morning she woke up before sunrise, restless. She padded barefoot to her kitchen and found a single note tucked under her front door. It wasn't a letter. Just a small card with a vineyard sketch on the front and a line in his sharp handwriting. "Sunlight looks different when you're in it." No signature. No pressure, just a man trying to learn how to stay. Delilah stood at the edge of the lower field, a clipboard balanced on one arm, squinting up at the clouds that had begun to gather like bruises across the sky. Rain wasn't due until the weekend, but California weather had never been one for keeping promises. She didn't hear Adrian approach until his voice came from behind her, low and deliberate. "I brought boots this time. Thought you might put me to work." She turned, surprised to find him in faded jeans and a navy pullover, a canvas jacket slung over one shoulder. The boots looked too clean to have ever seen mud, but she appreciated the gesture. "You're not dressed for spreadsheets," she said. "I called in a favor. My CFO owes me a week off," he replied. "Told her I had somewhere more important to be." Delilah raised an eyebrow. "More important than a billion-dollar company?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she handed him a pair of pruning shears from the crate at her feet. "Follow me. If you're going to pretend to be useful, you might as well sweat a little." They walked down the slope toward the lower vines, where the Cabernet Rose needed trimming before the rain hit. The sky hung low, the wind carrying a scent of wet earth and something sharper uncertainty, maybe. Adrian worked beside her without comment. His cuts were hesitant at first, but he watched her carefully, adjusting until he found a rhythm. She didn't offer praise, but she didn't correct him either. After a while, he asked, "Do you ever think about expanding? Opening another vineyard somewhere else?" Delilah clipped a stem, careful not to nick the fruit. "We've had offers, investors sniffing around, but this place is personal. I'm not interested in turning it into a machine." "I figured," he said. "But if you ever wanted to scale without losing control, I know people. Quiet people. People who'd back your vision without interfering." She stopped mid-snip and looked at him. "Why are you offering me that?" "Because I believe in people who build things with their hands," he said. "And because I've never heard anyone talk about grapes the way you do." Delilah let out a breath, not quite a sigh. "I'm not sure how to respond to that." "You don't have to," he said gently. "I just wanted to put it out there, no strings." She resumed cutting, her pace slower now. "When people offer no strings, there's always a net waiting underneath." "Not from me." They worked in silence for a few more minutes, the wind tugging at their jackets. Then she asked, "What was your mother like?" Adrian blinked, caught off guard. "Why, you never talk about your family," she said, not looking at him. "I figured there's a reason." He bent slightly to collect a fallen tendril. "She died when I was 22, cancer. She was the one who taught me how to see potential in people." "In ideas." Delilah nodded, still focused on the row. "Mine taught me how to hold a grudge and prune a vine in under 5 minutes. She's back in Oregon now, retired, remarried, and somehow still calls every Sunday at 7 a.m. Adrian chuckled. Sounds like she's got priorities. She'd hate you, Delilah said, glancing at him. She doesn't trust men in suits. I don't wear suits on weekends. She'd hate that more. They moved from one row to the next, the sun breaking through the clouds for a moment before vanishing again. The air was thick with the smell of crushed stems and the electric tang of oncoming rain. "Do you know what I realized last night?" Adrian asked. "What?" "I've never felt small before, not in boardrooms, not on stage at conferences. But standing here next to you in this place you've built from the ground up, I feel like I'm the one trying to catch up." Delilah paused, lowering her shears. "That's not a bad thing." "I know," he said. "It's humbling. And maybe that's exactly what I needed." When they finished the last row, she led him back to the barn where the old copper sink was bolted to the wall. They washed their hands side by side, the water running red with dust and sap. "You're not bad at this," she said, drying her fingers on a towel. "I learn fast." She looked up at him, eyes searching his face. "Why are you really still here?" "I don't want this to be a weekend I remember in passing," he said. "I want it to be the thing that changes everything." Delilah didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked toward the old wooden ladder that led to the barn loft, pausing halfway up the rungs. "Well," she said over her shoulder, "if you're going to change everything, you'd better know what's worth keeping." She disappeared into the loft. Adrian followed. The space was dusty but warm, lined with wine barrels from another decade. In the corner, a small record player sat under the eaves next to a stack of vinyl. Delilah knelt beside it, flipping through titles until she found one and set the needle down. Soft jazz filled the space, the kind that curled around your ribs and stayed there. She stood facing him. "I come here when the world gets too loud," she said. "Not many people know about it. Why are you showing me?" "Because I want you to understand that this isn't just a job, it's history. It's grief, it's hope, all tangled in one place." He stepped closer, the music pulsing between them. "Then let me be part of it," he said, "even if just for a little while." Delilah didn't move, but when he reached for her, she didn't resist. They kissed again, but slower this time. Less urgency, more understanding. It wasn't about seduction. It was about surrender. When they pulled apart, her forehead rested against his. "You have no idea what you're getting into," she whispered. "Maybe not," he said. "But for the first time in years, I want to find out." The rain came down in steady sheets, drumming against the old barn roof with a rhythm that muffled everything else. Delilah stood at the loft's edge, arms folded on the railing, watching the vineyard vanish beneath the gray blur. Behind her, Adrian sat on an overturned crate, elbow resting on his knee, his expression unreadable. Neither had spoken much since the kiss, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything had changed. Delilah finally broke the silence. "You're leaving tomorrow, aren't you?" He didn't deny it. "My board meeting's in Manhattan on Monday. I've already pushed it once." She nodded slowly, her eyes still on the rain. "I figured." Adrian rose, walking to stand beside her. "Come with me." Delilah turned her head sharply. "What?" "Just for a week," he said. "See where I come from. Let me show you the other side of my world." She narrowed her eyes. "You think I want to see your penthouse and your skyline view, watch you close million-dollar deals while I nod politely from the corner?" "No," he said, steady. "I think you might want to see me in a place where I don't know how to breathe unless I'm running." Delilah opened her mouth, then closed it again. She leaned back on the railing, rain misting through the slats like the sky couldn't quite decide whether to cry or hold back. "I'm not afraid of your world," she said quietly. "I'm afraid of what it would cost me to fit into it." Adrian looked down at his hands, flexing them once. "I don't want you to fit into anything. I want to build something where both worlds touch. I don't know if that's possible." He stepped closer but didn't touch her. "Then let's find out." She studied his face, the lines around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. There was no performance here, no pitch. Just a man who'd spent his life surrounded by power and had stumbled into something he couldn't calculate. Delilah turned back toward the loft. "I can't leave the vineyard during harvest prep." "I'll fly Mateo out with us," he said. "The staff can manage for a few days." "You've trained them well." She gave a dry laugh. "So now you're offering to fly out my employees like it's a casual favor." "I'm offering solutions," he said. "Because I don't want to walk away from this and wonder if we could have been more than a memory." Delilah paced to the far corner of the loft, where the record player sat silent. She ran her fingers along the edge, thinking. Do you always chase what you want this hard? Only when I've been running from it for years and didn't know it. She tilted her head. That almost sounded like an admission. It was, he said, walking across the loft. I've never built anything that didn't have an end game. Until this, she crossed her arms, and what exactly is this? He stopped a foot from her. A beginning, if you let it be. The sound of the rain softened, and for a moment, all Delilah could hear was the wind shifting through the gaps in the wood. I don't want to be a pause in your momentum, she said. I don't want to be a detour you remember fondly. You're not a detour, he said. You're the road I didn't know existed. She laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. That's the most ridiculous thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm not trying to be poetic, he replied. I'm trying to be honest. She looked up at him, and the quiet between them stretched. I'll come, she said finally, but only for 2 days. And if I hate it, I'm on the first flight back. Adrian's face didn't light up. He didn't grin like a man who'd gotten his way. Instead, he exhaled slowly like he'd been holding something in for too long. 2 days, he said. I'll take it. 2 days turned into 3. By the time the jet touched down in New York, Delilah had already made a list of 5 things she hated. The noise, the pace, the way people avoided eye contact, the way coffee cost more than a bottle of wine back home, and the feeling of being surrounded by glass but never seeing the sky. But by the second morning, she'd also discovered 5 things she didn't hate. The view from Adrian's terrace at sunrise, the way he ordered breakfast without asking and always got it right, the antique bookshop he'd taken her to without ceremony, the rooftop greenhouse hidden 3 stories above his office, and the way he looked at her like she wasn't just visiting, like maybe she belonged. On the 4th night, as they sat side by side on a private balcony overlooking the East River, Delilah pulled her knees up onto the lounge chair and rested her chin on them. I still don't understand how your world moves so fast without falling apart. It doesn't, he said. We just learned to rebuild mid-collapse. She turned her head. Do you miss it when you're gone? No, he answered, but I miss you when I'm here. She didn't answer right away, then she shifted closer and laid her head on his shoulder. I don't want to lose myself in this, she said softly. You won't, he promised, because I'm already finding myself in you. 3 weeks later, Adrian returned to the vineyard not for a weekend, not for a visit. He bought the adjacent acres that had been abandoned for over a decade and handed Delilah the deed. I don't want to change what you've built, he said. I want to expand it, with you. Delilah stared at the paperwork, then at him. You're serious. I want a life with roots, he said, and I want them here. She didn't cry. But her voice broke when she said, You're not the man I met that night. No, he said, stepping forward. I'm the man I became because I met you. They didn't need a grand proposal. There was no flash mob, no ring dropped in champagne. Just 2 people standing in the dirt where the vines would grow, hands clasped, hearts steady. 6 months later, they were married in the lower field just after sunset. The vines had already begun to bud again, and the guests sipped the syrah that had once ruined Adrian's palate in the best way. He kissed her under the string lights, the music drifting up through the trees, and whispered against her lips, Best investment I've ever made. Delilah laughed, her hand pressed to his chest. You're not buying me out, Ross. Never, he said. I'm just buying in. And when she looked around at the vineyard, the people they loved, the man who had turned a wine tasting into a turning point, she realized she hadn't just found love, she'd found home. Delilah adjusted the collar of her denim jacket as she waited beneath the arched entrance of the vineyard's newly renovated tasting room. The spring breeze carried the scent of crushed grass and young vines, but her attention was fixed on the sleek black SUV rolling up the gravel path. When the door opened, Adrian stepped out and shut it with the same quiet precision that had once made him seem untouchable. Now, it was just him, her husband, her partner in every sense of the word, who had traded boardrooms for barn doors and still somehow made both look effortless. She crossed the stone path toward him before he could speak. You didn't tell me you were stopping by the contractor's site first, she said, brushing sawdust from the sleeve of his shirt. I wanted to make sure the new platform was sturdy before the event, he replied. The last thing we need is a guest falling through our stage. You checked it yourself. I stood on it, jumped twice, and mildly offended the foreman when I asked about the screw spacing. He forgave me when I offered to fund his daughter's college scholarship. Delilah blinked. You did what? She wants to study agricultural science. I told him I knew someone who could give her a summer internship. Delilah folded her arms. You're playing matchmaker with my vineyard. I'm expanding the empire, he said. One future soil expert at a time. She shook her head, but there was a new softness in her eyes. You're impossible. I'm yours, he corrected, stepping closer. Their lips met in a kiss that carried none of the hesitation of early days, just certainty, comfort, and the quiet thrill of still choosing each other. When they separated, she rested her forehead against his. I can't believe it's happening, she murmured. Tomorrow's the first harvest festival we're hosting together. Adrian glanced at the horizon, where white tents had already been erected between the vines, their edges fluttering like sails in the warm wind. I can. You pulled this off in less than 4 months. We pulled it off, she corrected. Even if you did try to convince me to hire a jazz trio flown in from Paris. That trio was world-class. They cost more than our entire lighting budget. You can't put a price on ambience, he said, wrapping an arm around her waist. She leaned into him. We already have the best ambience. This place, these people, us. They walked together toward the main courtyard where staff were stringing the last of the lights overhead. Matteo waved as they passed, but didn't stop them. Everyone knew by now that when Adrian and Delilah were shoulder to shoulder, they were in their own orbit. As they passed the new tasting pavilion, Adrian slowed. I never asked, he said. Why the name Northfield? She brushed a hand along the wooden railing. It was what my father used to call this side of the vineyard. He always said the Northfield produced the boldest grapes, stubborn like me. I renamed the property after him once I took over, but I never told anyone why. Adrian looked at her. Thank you for telling me. You've earned it. That night, as the sun sank low behind the hills, Delilah found herself standing alone beneath the string lights above the courtyard. The staff had gone home to rest before the festival, and the vineyard had gone still. She turned when she heard footsteps. Adrian approached across the stone tiles, holding a small velvet box in his hand, her brow arched. We're already married. I know, he said. But there's something I didn't get to give you before, not because I forgot, because I hadn't earned it yet. He opened the box. Inside was a ring not flashy, not oversized. A single vintage cut diamond set in a delicate band of gold traced with vines. I wanted to wait until the vineyard was truly ours, until we built something together. Now that we have, this belongs on your hand. Delilah didn't speak. She stepped forward, let him slide the ring onto her finger, and kissed him with a depth that came not from passion alone, but from shared roots. The next morning, the festival began with golden light and the bustle of early guests. Tables overflowed with local food, wine flowed freely, and laughter echoed across the hills. Delilah walked the grounds with Adrian, her fingers laced with his, pausing to greet neighbors she'd known forever and newcomers who already felt like part of something bigger. By afternoon, the platform Adrian had inspected held a lineup of musicians, and as fiddle music spilled across the vines, he pulled her into a slow dance beneath the open sky. You're not terrible at this, she teased. I watched a tutorial, he replied, spinning her gently. You own 5 companies. You watched a video on how to dance. For you, I'd learned to juggle flaming barrels. Let's stick to dancing. As evening descended, lanterns cast a warm glow over the rows of vines and fireworks lit up the sky. 100 people watched in awe, but Adrian only watched her. Later that night, they lay on a blanket in the north field, the stars overhead, the air filled with the scent of harvest and something richer. I never imagined loving someone like this, Delilah whispered. Neither did I, Adrian said. But I think we were always going to find each other, one way or another. She turned toward him. And now we grow together. Years passed, the vineyard expanded, not just in acres, but in heart. A second location opened further upstate, with Delilah's name above the entrance and Adrian's hand in every beam laid into its foundation. Their lives folded into the land, into the wine, into the rhythm of a place that never stopped breathing. Every Sunday, no matter where they were, they walked the rows of the north field at dawn. Sometimes in silence, sometimes joking, but always with one hand in the other, and every time they reached the edge of the hill, Adrian would look at her like it was the first time. Because for him, it always was.